Echoes of a forgotten summer nightmare. I have a tale to tell, a chilling, bone-rattling story that will crawl under your skin and linger long after the sun dips below the horizon. This isn't a cozy bedtime story, mind you. This is a tale of shadows and whispers, of things that shouldn't be, unearthed from the dusty corners of the world. It was a sweltering August. The kind of heat that pressed down on you, thick and suffocating, leaching the energy from everything it touched. The city, a concrete beast, shimmered under the relentless sun, every alley and street corner radiating the oppressive warmth. I was on my beat, weaving my old pickup through the clogged arteries of traffic, the metal baking around me. Desperate for a reprieve, I spotted a small, makeshift refreshment stand tucked under the shade of a massive oak tree on the outskirts of town. Pulling over, I killed the engine, the silence a welcome relief from the city's roar. I ordered a large glass of iced tea, the condensation instantly forming on the glass, a promise of coolness. The proprietor, a kind, elderly woman with a weathered face, handed me a well-worn fan, and I gratefully waved it back and forth, pushing away the waves of heat that still clung to me. I drained half the glass in one long gulp, the cold liquid a shock to my system. In this inferno, a cold drink felt like a lifeline. As I sat there, letting the sweat dry on my skin, a hand clapped down on my shoulder, making me jump. "Ethan? Ethan, is that you?" I turned around, squinting in the bright light. Standing before me was a tall, lanky young man, dressed in a neatly tucked-in shirt, a smile spreading across his face. It took me a moment to place him. "You, oh my God. Liam. Liam, right? How've you been?" Liam nodded, his smile widening. Good, good. It's good to see you still remember your old friends." I slapped him on the shoulder, a familiar gesture. "Damn, you look a bit paler these days, don't you? Still skinny as a rail, though. That's what happens when you don't eat properly. Not everyone can be as robust as you." Liam reached for a glass of iced tea from the next table and settled down opposite me. Liam and I went way back, high school friends. After graduation, we'd taken different paths. Some of us went to college, others, like me, jumped straight into the workforce, chasing a paycheck. I was still hauling goods in my pickup, day in and day out, while Liam had finished university and was now a journalist for a respected newspaper in the city. Beside Liam was a black satchel, bulging with papers and what looked like old newspapers. Curiosity piqued, I asked, "So, where are you off to, all loaded up like this?" "Ah, it's a long story," Liam sighed. "Just dropped off some documents at the office. Coming back, the heat was unbearable, so I pulled over here. Never expected to run into you." As he spoke, Liam started rearranging the chaotic mess of papers in his bag. Suddenly, something slipped from a folder and landed at my feet. I picked it up and handed it to him, glancing at it as I did. It was a photograph of some kind of plant. I whistled. Well, a journalist and a botanist? You must be rolling in dough." Taking the photo from my hand, Liam fell silent, his expression changing rapidly. A sudden weariness settled on his face, and he let out a long sigh. Then, he asked me a question that made me freeze. "Ethan, do you believe in ghosts?" I stared at him, confused. What in the world? That came out of nowhere. Liam's face grew serious as he looked at me. "Just answer the question, all right?" I shrugged. We were talking about something else entirely. "And ghosts? What are you talking about?" "I've driven tens of thousands of miles in this truck, crisscrossing states. Most of those spooky stories are just made up to scare people. There's no such thing as ghosts. You're a journalist, and you believe in that stuff? Liam shook his head, a flicker of fear in his eyes. Ethan, there are strange things in this world, things so strange I can't help but believe. We're living in a society with so many mysteries still hidden from us. I was always a skeptic, an atheist even, until it happened. Liam hesitated, then lowered his voice and pushed the photograph towards me again. Have you ever heard of a mushroom that can cure cancer? I looked at him, into the dark, mirror-like pupils of his eyes. The intensity of his gaze told me he wasn't joking. I looked closer at the photograph, my casual attitude dissolving. What? A mushroom that can do that? But what does that have to do with ghosts? Liam drained the rest of his iced tea in one gulp. In a low, somber voice, he began to tell me a story he had painstakingly uncovered himself. His eyes drifted to the distance, and his usually youthful face creased with a struggle to articulate a terrifying and gruesome tragedy that had befallen those who dared to venture into the untamed wilderness in search of this fabled mushroom, the one that held the power to turn death's tide. He started with the expedition. It wasn't a scientific one, not in the traditional sense. It was funded by a desperate man, a wealthy industrialist named Mr. Abernathy, whose wife was succumbing to a relentless cancer. He'd heard whispers, ancient legends spoken by remote tribes in the deep, uncharted forests, legends of a fungus, glowing with an ethereal light, that could heal any ailment, even the most terminal. Desperation, as it often does, had driven him to extremes. He assembled a team, not of botanists or medical experts, but of hardened individuals. There was Silas, a gruff, experienced guide who knew the wilderness like the back of his hand, but whose eyes held a perpetual wariness. There was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant but controversial mycologist, obsessed with rare fungi and rumored to dabble in less-than-orthodox research. And then there was Thomas, a young, eager photographer hired to document the journey, full of youthful optimism that would soon be brutally extinguished. And lastly, Mr. Abernathy's nephew, a quiet, nervous young man named Arthur, sent along to represent the family's interests. The expedition was set for late September of the previous year, a time when the forest's secrets were said to be most potent. Their destination, a remote, almost mythical mountain range known only as the Whispering Peaks, deep within an unnamed forest, miles from any established settlement. Liam's voice dropped lower as he described their departure. The air was crisp and cool as they set out, the scent of damp earth and pine filling their lungs. The initial days were challenging but uneventful. They navigated dense undergrowth, crossed rushing streams, and climbed steep inclines. Thomas, ever the optimist, captured breathtaking landscapes with his camera, the vibrant greens and browns of the forest a stark contrast to the concrete jungle they had left behind. Dr. Reed, with her meticulous notes and samples, seemed almost giddy with anticipation, her eyes scanning the forest floor for any sign of unusual growth. Silas, however, remained stoic, his gaze constantly sweeping their surroundings, a silent guardian. Arthur, the nephew, was a bundle of nerves, jumpy at every rustle in the leaves, his face growing paler with each passing mile. They were several days into their journey when the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, still and silent. The usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of birds, the buzzing of insects, faded away, replaced by an unnerving quiet. The trees seemed to press closer, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out. The sunlight, which had dappled through the leaves, now struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and shift at the edges of their vision. It was on the seventh night, camped in a small clearing, that Thomas first noticed something strange. He was reviewing the day's photographs, his flashlight beam dancing across the images on his digital camera. He paused on a picture of a gnarled, ancient tree, its bark covered in moss. In the background, barely visible in the dim light, was a faint, shimmering white shape. He zoomed in, his breath catching in his throat. It looked like a figure, translucent and flowing, standing just behind the tree. He dismissed it as a trick of the light, a long exposure capturing movement. But the image lingered in his mind. The next day, the strange occurrences escalated. Arthur, who had been on edge since the beginning, became increasingly agitated. He claimed he heard whispers on the wind, faint voices calling his name. He saw fleeting movements in his peripheral vision, gone the moment he turned his head. Dr. Reed, ever the scientist, attributed it to the stress of the expedition and the isolation. Silas, however, said nothing, his jaw tight, his gaze even more vigilant. They were nearing the Whispering Peaks when they found the cave. It was hidden behind a curtain of vines, a dark, gaping maw in the side of the mountain. A cold, damp air emanated from within, carrying with it a faint, earthy smell. Silas hesitated at the entrance, a deep frown etched on his face. "This isn't on any map I know," he said, his voice low. Dr. Reed, however, was ecstatic. This could be it. The perfect environment for a rare fungus. She pushed past Silas, her headlamp beams slicing through the darkness. The cave was vast and winding, the air thick with the scent of decay and something else, something, sweet and cloying, yet strangely unsettling. The walls dripped with moisture, and strange, phosphorescent fungi grew in patches, casting an eerie, greenish glow that pulsed faintly. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the sense of being watched intensified. Thomas felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, as if unseen eyes were following their every move. It was in a large cavern, deep within the cave, that they found it. Growing on a cluster of ancient, petrified roots was a patch of mushrooms unlike anything they had ever seen. They were pure white, almost translucent, and they emitted a soft, ethereal glow that illuminated the cavern with an otherworldly light. The glow pulsed rhythmically, like a slow heartbeat. The air around them felt strangely charged, humming with an unseen energy. Dar. Reed let out a gasp, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and scientific fervor. "The lumina fungus," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's real." Silas, however, looked deeply disturbed. He kept his distance, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife. Arthur, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with fear, his eyes darting around the cavern, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. As Dr. Reed carefully began to collect samples, the glowing mushrooms seemed to intensify their light, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the cave walls. And then, they heard it. A low, mournful wail, echoing from the depths of the cavern. It wasn't a human sound, nor was it animal. It was something ancient, something full of sorrow and rage. Arthur screamed, a high, piercing sound that bounced off the cave walls. He stumbled backward, tripping over a rock and falling to the ground, his eyes wide with terror. And then, it appeared. From the shadows at the back of the cavern, a figure began to coalesce. It was a flowing, shimmering white form, translucent and ethereal. It had no discernible features, no face, no limbs, just a swirling, shifting shape of glowing white. It glided towards them, its movement silent and smooth, yet unnervingly fast. The air around it grew even colder, a biting chill that seemed to penetrate their very bones. Thomas, ever the photographer, instinctively raised his camera, but his hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold it steady. He managed to snap a single picture before the glowing figure was upon them. The figure moved towards Arthur first. The young man was still on the ground, paralyzed by fear. The white form flowed over him, enveloping him in its chilling embrace. Arthur's screams were abruptly cut short, replaced by a guttural gurgle. When the glowing figure pulled away, Arthur's body was limp, his eyes staring blankly at the cave's ceiling. His skin was pale and drawn, as if the life had been sucked out of him. Panic erupted. Silas roared, drawing his knife and lunging at the figure, but the blade passed through it as if it were smoke. Dr. Reed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overridden by terror, scrambled to gather her samples, her hands fumbling with her equipment. The glowing figure turned its attention to Silas. The seasoned guide fought bravely, but his physical strength was useless against an entity that existed outside the realm of the tangible. The white form flowed over him, and Silas, too, fell silent, his body collapsing to the ground. Thomas watched in horror, his camera forgotten. Dr. Reed was the only one left besides him. She was frantically trying to escape, scrambling back towards the cave entrance. The glowing figure turned towards her, its silent pursuit terrifying in its inevitability. "Run, Thomas! Run!" Dr. Reed shrieked, her voice laced with desperation. Thomas didn't need to be told twice. He turned and bolted, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't look back, the chilling wail echoing behind him, spurring him onward. He stumbled through the winding cave, the eerie glow of the fungi now seeming menacing, the dripping walls feeling like grasping hands. He burst out of the cave entrance, gasping for air, the sunlight a blinding relief after the oppressive darkness. He didn't stop running until he was far from the cave, far from the whispering peaks. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached, the terrifying image of the glowing white figure and the silence of the dead etched into his mind. He was found days later, wandering aimlessly, delirious and traumatized. He had the single photograph he had managed to take in the cavern, a blurry image of a glowing white shape against a dark background. He also had a few of Dr. Reed's sample bags, clutched tightly in his hand, containing a few specimens of the lumina fungus. Liam paused, taking a deep breath. The heat of the afternoon sun seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the icy chill of his story. He looked at me, his eyes still holding that flicker of fear. Thomas was institutionalized, Liam continued, his voice barely above a whisper. He never fully recovered. He would babble about the white flowing death and the whispers in the dark. He died a few years later, still haunted by what he saw. Liam held up the photograph he had dropped earlier. It was a clearer image, a close-up of one of the lumina fungus specimens. It glowed faintly even in the sunlight, a soft, almost inviting light. "And the fungus?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "That's where things get even stranger," Liam said. The samples Thomas brought back were analyzed. They did contain compounds with incredible healing properties, far beyond anything known to science. But they also contained something else, something foreign. Something that couldn't be identified. And every person who came into close contact with the samples, the scientists who studied them, the lab technicians, they all started experiencing strange things. Whispers, shadows, a feeling of being watched. Some of them even claimed to see the glowing white figure, just like Thomas described. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The research was immediately classified. All information about the lumina fungus and the expedition was suppressed. The official story was that the team was lost in a hiking accident. But I dug deeper. I found Thomas's family, still grieving and struggling to understand what happened. I found the old news reports about the missing hikers and the brief, almost dismissive mention of a strange illness that afflicted the researchers. I found fragments of Dr. Reed's notes, hidden away by a sympathetic colleague, mentioning the ascensions of the fungus and their presence in the cave. Liam tapped the photograph with his finger. "The theory is, the lumina fungus isn't just a plant. It's connected to something else. Something ancient and powerful. The cave wasn't just a habitat, it was a gateway, a place where the veil between our world and another is thin. The glowing figure, it wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense. It was a guardian, a protector of the fungus, or perhaps, an entity created by the fungus itself, feeding on the life force of those who dared to disturb it. He shuddered, despite the heat. Imagine, Ethan. A fungus that can heal, but at a terrible cost. It offers life, but it demands a price paid in fear and in the very essence of those who seek its power. The glowing white figure, it's not just a specter. It's the manifestation of the fungus's defense mechanism, its way of warding off those who would exploit its power. He looked at me intently. I've been researching this for months, following every lead, every whisper. I've been to the library, digging through old newspaper archives, looking for similar stories, similar disappearances in remote areas. I've interviewed people who live near the Whispering Peaks, people who speak of lights in the mountains and strange sounds in the night. The more I uncover, the more I realize that this wasn't a one-time event. There have been other expeditions, other desperate souls seeking the lumina fungus, and they have all met similar fates. The mountain, the cave, the fungus. They are a trap, a deadly allure. Liam's voice grew strained. And the terrifying part is, I think the fungus is spreading. Not just the physical spores, but the influence. The fear. I've started experiencing things myself. Shadows moving in my apartment, whispers when I'm alone. I even think I saw it the other night, a faint, glowing white figure at the end of the hallway. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, his face etched with exhaustion and fear. I'm writing a book about it, Ethan. Exposing the truth. But I'm scared. Really scared. What if the fungus, or whatever is connected to it, knows I'm digging? What if it's coming for me? The heat of the afternoon seemed to dissipate entirely, replaced by a bone-deep chill that had nothing to do with the iced tea. The bustling street felt distant, the sounds of the city muffled. I looked at Liam, at the haunted look in his eyes, and for the first time, I believed him. The photograph of the glowing fungus in his hand no longer looked like a scientific curiosity. It looked like a harbinger of something ancient and terrifying, something that lurked in the shadows, waiting to claim those who dared to venture too close to its secrets. The story continued, Liam detailing the strange occurrences that had plagued him since he began his investigation. He spoke of vivid, terrifying nightmares, filled with the image of the glowing white figure and the chilling wail. He described the feeling of being constantly watched, of cold spots appearing in his apartment even on the warmest nights. He showed me blurry, almost indistinguishable photographs he had taken in his own home, claiming they showed faint traces of the glowing entity. He spoke of the pressure he was facing. His editor at the newspaper, a pragmatic man, was growing increasingly skeptical of his research, urging him to focus on more conventional stories. He'd even received anonymous threats, cryptic messages warning him to stop his investigation. Liam's voice grew more frantic as he described his growing isolation. Friends and colleagues were starting to distance themselves, put off by his obsession and his increasingly erratic behavior. He felt like he was losing his grip on reality, constantly questioning what was real and what was a product of his fear. He confided in me that he had even tried to destroy the fungus samples he had from Thomas. He had burned them, buried them, even tried to dissolve them in acid, but they seemed strangely resilient. He claimed that the glowing light would reappear, faint at first, but then growing stronger, as if the fungus was regenerating, feeding on something unseen. The story stretched on, weaving a tapestry of fear and the unknown. Liam spoke of the possibility that the lumina fungus was not of this world, that it was an alien life form, or perhaps a symbiotic entity that had found a way to exist between dimensions, feeding on the life force of living beings. He theorized that the glowing white figure was not a spirit of the dead, but a manifestation of the fungus's consciousness, a predatory entity that defended its existence with chilling efficiency. He talked about the other expeditions, the ones that had been lost to the wilderness. He had managed to unearth fragments of their stories, whispered warnings from the few survivors who had stumbled out of the mountains, their minds broken and their bodies emaciated. He spoke of a recurring theme in these accounts, the overwhelming sense of dread, the feeling of being hunted, and the chilling sight of the glowing white figure. Liam's story was long and winding, filled with details that painted a vivid and terrifying picture of a world where the boundaries between life and death, the natural and the supernatural, were blurred. He spoke of the ancient legends of the Whispering Peaks, stories told by the indigenous tribes of a place where the spirits of the mountain were restless and vengeful, guarding a hidden power that should never be disturbed. He ended his tale with a chilling admission. He felt a growing connection to the fungus, a strange pull towards the Whispering Peaks. He felt as if the fungus was calling to him, beckoning him back to the cave, to the place where it resided. He was both terrified and strangely drawn to it, a morbid curiosity battling with his instinct for self-preservation. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the street, Liam finished his story. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for understanding, for belief. "I don't know what to do, Ethan," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'm trapped. I can't stop researching, I can't stop writing, but I know I'm putting myself in danger. And I can't shake the feeling that it's getting closer. The glowing figure. I see it more often now, in the corners of my vision, in the reflections in windows. I feel its cold presence. I think it's coming for me." He gathered his papers, his hands trembling slightly. "I have to go. There's more research to do. More to uncover before it's too late." He stood up, a gaunt figure silhouetted against the fading light. He gave me a weak smile, a shadow of the cheerful friend I had known in high school. "Be careful, Ethan," he said, his voice a low whisper. "There are things in this world, things we don't understand. Things that are better left undisturbed." And with that, he was gone, disappearing into the twilight, leaving me sitting there, the empty glass of iced tea before me, the chilling weight of his story pressing down on me. The oppressive heat of the day was forgotten, replaced by a deep, unsettling cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. The world outside, the familiar city street, suddenly felt alien, filled with unseen shadows and unheard whispers. I never saw Liam again. I tried to contact him, but his phone was disconnected. I went to his apartment, but it was empty, cleared out. The newspaper office had no record of him ever working there, a chilling detail that made my blood run cold. It was as if Liam, and his terrifying story, had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the lingering echo of his words and the unsettling image of a glowing white figure. As I sat there, the darkness deepening around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A cold breeze, unnatural in the warm August air, brushed against my skin. I looked around, my eyes scanning the shadows, half expecting to see a faint, flowing white shape in the periphery of my vision. The story, Liam's story, had taken root in my mind, a seed of fear that was beginning to sprout. I knew, deep down, that his tale wasn't just a product of a stressed mind. It was a terrifying truth, a glimpse into a hidden world of ancient power and chilling entities. And as I finally started my truck, the engine sputtering to life, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. It had just begun, and I, by listening to Liam, had become a part of it, a link in a chain of fear stretching back to the whispering peaks and the glowing white fungus that guarded its deadly secrets. The night was long and dark, and for the first time in my life, I was truly, deeply afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows. The image of the glowing and flowing white ghost figure, bone-chilling and creepy, was now burned into my mind, a haunting reminder of the terrifying reality that existed just beyond the edge of our understanding. And I knew, with a certainty that sent shivers down my spine, that I would never look at a mushroom the same way again. The forest, once a place of natural beauty, now held a sinister promise, a lurking danger that whispered of death and the unknown. The story of the Lumina fungus and its ghostly guardian was a story that would haunt my dreams for years to come, a chilling reminder that some secrets are best left buried in the dark, forgotten corners of the world.